Morning all, Benny Matthews. We're back. Footy Rants is live. For those that are following on YouTube today, I've got a little bit of screenplay just because I'm going solo. So if you guys are following on Facebook now, maybe post some questions. No doubt most of you are at work. It's about 10 a.m. Brisbane time. So there's a little bit of screenplay going on via YouTube. So you'll be able to, I'll post all the links and all the audio and stuff like that. But yeah, probably a little bit more to get through via YouTube. But I thought I'd still do what I do, even though I'm by myself again today. Just get through a few more interesting things around stories of the week and shit like that. So, yeah, look, 5 weeks. So as of the end of next week, we're going to be about a quarter of the way through the season. So, those teams that are thinking, we might only have 1 or 2 wins on the board, slowly those losses are starting to count up. So all of a sudden we have to start taking into consideration the likes of the Dragons, the Warriors, the Tigers, the Titans, Newcastle. Like, these are all teams in the top 8. So the ladder looks like this. So we got the Dragons, Warriors, Penrith and the Tigers in the top 4. Who had the Warriors and the Tigers in the top 4 after over a month of footy? Absolutely crazy. Then we go on to the bottom half of the top 8. The Roosters, Titans, Newcastle and Manly round out the top 8 despite losing on the weekend. And then the bottom 8, Melbourne, Rabbitohs, Sharks, Broncos, Raiders, Cowboys, Bulldogs and Parramatta still without a win. Who would have thought that you would have seen Melbourne, Cronulla, Brisbane and North Queensland in the bottom 8 after 5 weeks of footy? Just goes to show that, the nature of the beast that is the NRL. It's a knife's edge, really, as far as results go season to season. And I think we're in a transition period at the moment as far as era of the sport goes, where we're going to see a few clubs start to develop and become, more regular winners that we're expected of. I just want to go through a few stories. I know Cuff and I like to have a bit of a yarn at the start of the podcast before we dive into anything proper review. So yeah, for those following on YouTube, you'll be able to see some of these stories that I've got up. And the big talking point was the post-match press conference for Newcastle and Coach Nathan Brown with his little verbal attack on the veteran coach Wayne Bennett. I quite enjoyed it, to be perfectly honest. I'd like to see more of it. I think the personalities in the game sort of shy away, and Blake and I have discussed this before. We think it sort of comes back to that tall poppy syndrome nature of Australia, where, if you sort of speak out of school, that fear of failure later on down the track, you're afraid that that's going to come back to haunt you. So, look, again, yeah, I really enjoyed it. Just a quote, if you haven't seen it, go back and look it up on either, Fox Sports or the NRL website. But they were basically sort of, questioning him. I don't actually know what Wayne Bennett had said to trigger the attack from Nathan Brown. But yeah, he's quoted here as saying, the old fox, he's won 7 premierships. He's coached for 30 years and I ain't ever publicly bagged Wayne or anyone. And then he comes and he has a shot at me. I just don't think he needs to behave like that. The reality is, when Wayne came to town, if he thought with his big head rather than his little head, I wouldn't have had to rebuild the joint. And then he just storms out of the press conference, and Mitchell Pearce, the captain, had a good little chuckle as well. So, look, I thought he raised some relatively valid points. Didn't necessarily leave the club in the greatest of hands, but to put it simply down to Wayne Bennett, I know it was probably more in the moment that Brown's blown up and defending his coaching credentials as well, and hats off to him. But also Nathan Tinkler was a big part of Newcastle falling apart financially and all the debt that he assumed throughout his various business ventures. So yeah, that was a little entertainment value for the sport, outside of seeing public behaviour dramas that like we're usually used to. The second one was again, it's hard to know when you're watching the big networks, whether it be Fox or Channel 9, whether these certain personalities and commentators alike are saying things to be deliberately controversial to help draw a headline. And, at the end of the day, it's their job. The ratings that I'm sure Fox are getting now that they've got the share of the media, and there's so many different shows. They got the dedicated channel after last season, and it's really starting to build. I think as far as speaking to the broader market, having so many female staff members, they're obviously ticking that socio-political box as well. But yeah, Brandy sort of came out and said before the start of the Cowboys game, he asked if he thinks JT's played too long. He's quoted as saying, "He looks a little out of sorts. He's looking like someone that's possibly played the game a little bit too long. I've seen players when they get too old, they hit the ground more often, they are easy to tackle, they've lost half a yard of speed. That's not to say JT won't find his feet, but that's how he's playing at the moment. He looks half a yard off the pace." And Cooper Cronk was actually on the panel at the same time, and was sort of a little taken aback, and was fairly confident, and then backed up JT and said that he felt like he was probably going to be one of the best players on the field. And I guess not that anyone likes to see anyone fail, but I guess the sentiments that Brandy was echoing did sort of come true. JT had a pretty shocking game again. Well, not a shocking game, but yeah, I guess it's getting back to the point that he's trying to make. It's just below par, below the standard that we expect of this champion player. And I know as a Cowboys fan, sort of leading into this season, you sort of felt as though now that he was stepping away from representative football, it would only add to the value that he was going to bring to the side as well, which hasn't yet happened after 5 weeks of footy, unfortunately. But we'll get more to the performance once I break that game down. But yeah, I just wanted to touch on a few of those little things. Aside from that, we've also had the conversation around the referees and where things were improving there. And I thought we saw a lot more free-flowing footy. There was, still the penalty. I guess the argument now for the clubs is, we've had certain teams lose last week because of this disciplinary action taken more strictly by the referees, and now it seemingly seems to have lightened up. So now I'm behind the 8 ball as of last week. The team that comes to mind is one that's on the screenplay now, is the Canterbury Bulldogs. A few disciplinary things there, and you could really argue that Greg English try when Josh Jackson was out of position and stuff like that. So they're the difference between winning and losing, making finals, not making finals. So let's get into the round. We go back to Thursday now. The Raiders off the duck egg with a 26 points to 10 victory over Canterbury Bulldogs, and yeah, this is the opportunity where I have to eat my humble pie. Had Rhino sort of asked me on the Facebook Live whether I thought the public dressing down that Ricky Stewart gave last week was going to cause a response in his players, particularly the likes of Leilua and Rapana, and I, out and out said, no, I don't see it happening at all. I think they'll lose again. And lo and behold, arguably the best player on the field was none other than Joey Leilua. So clearly it did work. He scored 2 tries within the first 15 minutes of the game, and that really set the Raiders up for a really strong game. And the thing that I liked most about this performance was just the adversity they sort of overcame, especially in the second half. There were a number of injuries. There were a couple of HIAs. Adahingano got knocked out really, really brutally by Greg Eastwood, and then Michael Oldfield, the substitute winger, also succumbed to another HIA. And then Sam Williams, the halfback, ended up going off. So all of a sudden they were down to 1 on the bench, and you're getting into the latter stages of the game, and Kieran Foran scores in the 51st minute, and all of a sudden you're sitting there as someone who tipped the Bulldogs, and I'm like, well, here they come. It's 12-6. They just got to get in the arm wrestle. But then all of a sudden, 5 minutes later, Jared Croker, who got shifted to the wing, scores that try, and they just kept going on with it. So this leads me to the questions of what happens now. Again, we come back to that question that we've asked probably for the last 2 or 3 seasons. What happens with the Canterbury Bulldogs attack? what are the answers? So we sort of go down and have a look at the performers for the Raiders, and like I said, it was BJ Leilua was the standout. But where that attack lacked for me, for Canterbury, is evident in the defensive efforts of Aiden Caesar and Sam Williams. Only had to make 8 and 5 tackles respectively. So that sort of tells me that especially when you've got someone as fresh within the system as Williams coming back into the side, having played little football with Caesar, you want to really make sure that they're working overtime in defence so that when they do get the footy in hand, you're hoping that they're a yard of pace off. And I think you've got to start to come back and have a look at the tradition of the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs with respect to their forwards play. It's that rock 'em, sock 'em, get up the guts, get in the arm wrestle. But are they trying to relive an era of rugby league that is no longer viable anymore? And that's that 1980s style where they did have such success. You've got the likes of Aaron Woods and David Clemmer there, but I don't think that necessitates playing that style of football. When you've got attacking weapons, the seemingly best move that's come out of all of this is Moses Mbai to fullback, but he's just still not getting enough opportunities on the ball. You've got the luxury of having someone with the ball playing ability of a Hopewade on an edge. Again, doesn't see enough of the ball. They need to play more to their edges. They've got some great back rowers in Josh Jackson and for Tyler Mariner, but yeah, seeing the number of tackles, so 13 combined tackles from the halves, just illustrates to me that they're not playing expansive enough football. And what worked in their win a fortnight ago didn't work this game, and then they never had anything else to follow it up with. So I think that shows the flaw and immaturity of an attacking outfit when you try to keep going for something working. It's in every other, like 15 of the other teams within the NRL, it's in their best interest to watch your gameplay and then snuff that out. But then it's in your best interest as a professional football team to have something outside of that one game style of gameplay. And I think we're starting to see a few clubs that are struggling with that at the moment. The clubs like the Brisbane Broncos come to mind. Even my Cowboys are sort of doing the same thing. So, you really need to question, I guess, the forward-thinking nature of some of the leaders within this team to say, hey, this isn't working, so what do we do now? They've all played enough football to realise that they have the control. Yes, they can go in with a game plan from Dean Pay, but at the same time, like, they're all individuals that can come together and work on something new, even if that is on the fly, because you don't know what could come out as a result of that. So that for me was the biggest disappointment, is seeing this stalling nature of the Canterbury attack yet again. So the question I'm now asking is, how long until Josh Cleland gets a start in the NRL? We've seen his name dropped a few times. The big hype was around Marshall King when he first came into six and they got that win. They've now put 2 losses together. And again, how much change is too much change? I don't know. And to I guess, support my sentiments of changing things up in attack, it would be to keep some smaller men, play some up-style footy. I'd like to see Marshall King stay there and go back to his 9 position. And Cleland's quite a big guy. If you haven't seen anything of him, he sort of came through that successful Ipswich Jets side a couple of years ago and then moved down south. I think he had a year with the Sharks before moving to the Bulldogs. But yeah, he's a big body. I think he would complement Kieran Foran quite well, where you could try and develop either one of them into a genuine half and then let that running nature play off the back of that. I don't think you need 3 runners there, even though Foran is traditionally a runner of the ball in the teams that we've seen him playing in the past. But, is that over now? Should we see him play that first receiver role and really start to lead a side around that then, the Dragons are having success with and playing that running style left and right with a 5'8" and a fullback, especially now that Mbai does have that ball playing ability and is showing up either side of the ruck with great success. So Look, yeah, more and more disappointment for Bulldogs fans, unfortunately, and they come up against the Cowboys, so they're in 14th and 15th place respectively with only one win each, and one of those sides is going to stay there. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting once we break that down and see the squads for that game. But yeah, hats off to Ricky Stewart. You've seen the bloke stressing out on the sideline, jumping up and down. He spent the whole time on the sideline, not in the box, which I like. You see coaches like Brad Arthur and the like sort of come down on the sideline to be with their players. So I think areas where they can continue to build on is just that support from the back five. They did really well in that transitionary period to help gain that momentum within the first three tackles of each set. So yeah, big positives in the way. They're off the mark. Big confidence builder, and that's what BJ Lua and Rapana are. They're confidence players. So now that they've shaken that off their back and sort of stuck it to people like me and mainstream media, they can move forward and look to try and generate some momentum. So hats off to them. Good on them. We move to Friday night. Cronulla versus the Roosters. A really comfortable win in the end for Sydney, 28 points to 10. And again, a point that I made leading into the game, even though it was being played at Shark Park, they haven't really made it a fortress like they did back in 2016, and it showed. There were some individuals who were on the up for Cronulla, and that was seemingly Valentine Holmes, despite having an error out of dummy half early on in the game, went on to score 2 good tries. But for the Roosters, I think it came a lot down to a bit more of the discipline. So we have a look at the completion rates. It was quite a good game. Both sides completing roughly around that 80%. We go down to the negative play here. 10 errors made by the Roosters and 9 by the Sharks. Penalties conceded 8 and 7 respectively. You've really got to look at the consistency that you're trying to generate when another side is turning that amount of football over. You need to try and capitalise on that from a Cronulla perspective, and they didn't. When you're matching set for set and it gets a little bit sloppy, it really gets hard to generate that when you're playing from behind the 8 ball. And the only player who really looked likely for Cronulla in the forward pack was Andrew Fafita. I thought he had probably the best game of his season so far. But then, goes off late with that injury. I can't even really remember what it was. I think they tried to disguise it as a HIA, and I think they did get away with it in the end. But yeah, hats off to the Roosters. Cronk showing his maturity. You can sort of see that during the game that he's talking a lot more on the field. And you can almost see a little bit of the frustration there that he obviously hasn't had to deal with for a number of years, because I guess the systems are so tight at the Melbourne Storm that everyone really knows their role, and it must be a little bit overwhelming at times to have to continually talk. Even with Kiri, you see him having lengthy conversations at times about where the play needs to go and things that they're working towards. But I guess that was the sort of challenge that he would have been looking to embark on in moving to the Roosters, knowing that the success that is demanded of that club as well. But they're sort of stumbling at that final hurdle since winning the title back in 2013. So no doubt they're looking to build towards something like that yet again. So yeah, that just awareness and desperation, pushing up on the footy. We've seen the rewards for Madison in scoring his couple of tries, and that was positive. But as going back to the Sharks' attack now, it was really clunky. Still missing the likes of Dugan. So they've had to change out the back yet again. So Moylan ended up going back to fullback for the first time this season. So that's the third different fullback in only 5 weeks. And when you're making that many changes to the spine, you have to argue the fact that it is hard to find consistency. But yeah, Moylan is still playing with the catch pass off the cuff nature that he had success with at Penrith. And I've mentioned this before, that he's really struggling with the structure that Cronulla play with. And I think a lot of that has to do with the age and maturity of this Cronulla forward pack. You know, you've got the likes of Gallen, Pryor, Fafita, Lewis, Graham. They're all older guys. There's not really any super young kids coming through in that forward pack that are able to play that off-the-cuff nature that he's used to with the youth that is in that Penrith pack that he's left. And I think he's used to having guys just showing up on that ad-lib style, and that's where the errors are sort of coming in, and he's really struggling to comprehend with that. And you can see the frustration on his face. He ended up coming up with 3 or 4 costly errors, and like we said, when you're talking about a team that comes up with 9 errors total, and you're responsible for almost half of them, and you're a part of that spine, you've really got to put your hand up and say, hey, fuck, I've got to be more disciplined than that. And after you come up with 1 or 2, even though you are trying to make opportunities, I get that with a scoreline when you're down like that, especially, 3 tries in the first half, and then you're trying to get that arm wrestle back in the second half, because the Sharks come out really, really strong. They started to open up the edges. They got to Kiri quite well in the early exchanges, but then some good defence from the Roosters saw them, as we see quite often, the team then get out of trouble quite easily because the opposition struggle to transition from all the ball they've had early into their first bout of defence, and opportunities arise, and some are taken, some are not, and in this instance the Roosters took those and were first to score. So a good way to respond after a super disappointing loss for the Roosters last week to the Warriors, and I think that sort of echoed my thoughts leading into this game, that losing in that fashion, it was perhaps more just a really, really vast loss of momentum after they scored really easily in the first couple of minutes, and they could just never wrestle it back. And that's credit more so to the New Zealand Warriors for continuing to not let the Roosters get back into an arm wrestle. And then for the Sharks, I wasn't super convinced. 1 try scored. They kicked their way to victory through penalty goals. So yeah, I really felt that the Roosters could bounce back with a lot more structure, and then obviously more changes to the spine. Even though I actually liked it, I liked having that stability of Hodkinson there. But again, talking about this contrasting nature that we're used to seeing with some of the more successful clubs at the moment, it's evident that it's not there with a halves combination of Hodkinson and Townsend. So yeah, back to the drawing board for Flanagan, and there's a few successful coaches over the last 3 seasons in Flanagan, Bellamy, and Green. I wouldn't say extreme pressure just yet, but definitely mounting pressure for those 3 coaches as the season ages. The other game on Friday night, Dragons and the Rabbitohs. Look, scoreline for me doesn't really reflect the true nature and the true dominance of the St. George side. I thought they played extremely well yet again, led by the tenacity of their forward pack. I think even contributors is the best way to describe their success for the forwards at the moment, and it sort of resonates with their style of play from last year's success in the first half of the season. So no doubt the idea now is to continue to progress that, and just that balance between Vaughan, Graham, and DeBellin, those middles in particular, to start the game was really, really good. Jack DeBellin was great yet again. I feel like every week Graham is continuing to improve, but yet again that ball play from DeBellin at first receiver is working a treat, just to create that extra bit of space off the ruck for your pivots. Areas where I thought the Dragons lacked a little bit was just that running game from their halves that has worked well early on from Hunt and Widdop. They only had 5 carries between themselves, and I hope that that's addressed by McGregor leading into this week. And I'm pretty sure the Dragons have the Sharks again for another derby, knowing that they came down from 14-0 last time and getting that win. They'll be keen to start a lot better and make sure that they go on with a victory to continue this unbeaten run. Obviously, the outside backs laying that platform supremely well. for McGregor's side. The finishing ability of Nene McDonald for me and Ewan Aitken, they're two players that are really starting to put themselves in contention for Origin jerseys over the next couple of weeks. The success of a side in this first portion of the year, it really does wonders for the questionability of an Origin coach to say, hey, where do I fit the current form of these players into my structure outside of guys that I feel the need to pick based off their previous performances within State of Origin. And it's going to be really, really interesting to see some of the, like, there's going to be some, no doubt, risk involved from both Fittler and Walters with the sides that they choose, but I think it's a necessary risk for the development. And again, I think we're going to see, we're coming into a new era of State of Origin football as well, the passing of the baton, so to speak, and I'm really looking forward to it as a rugby league fan to see what sort of blue side we end up getting together. So obviously Nene McDonald's in contention for Queensland, Ewan Aitken for New South Wales. Ewan Aitken's performance one-on-one with GI, geez, you haven't seen someone take the game to GI like that in a number of years, and it was really, really exciting to see. Even just physically, the contact that he was able to withstand, and I think Kevy Walters, to an extent, has sort of backed himself into a corner by already saying that he's going to pick Greg Inglis. I don't think that that's the right move. I don't like the way that State of Origin is coached in that respect, that you're showing loyalty and blah 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 blah. It's like you're the coach, you're the you decide who stays and who goes, and I think the confidence around that. Yes, no doubt you want to build respect because, let's face it, when you are in camp, you're not really coaching the individual. It's about the cohesion of that side coming as quickly as you can. So yeah, for me, those guys are both picked. As long, I know we're only at the start of April, so we've still got about another 6 weeks or so before those sides are selected. But hell, it's a great start, and the finishing capabilities of Nene McDonald are probably something that gets me most excited. And yeah, since that corner post rule has come into play over the last, it's got to be about 5 or 6 seasons, I suppose, since we've had that rule changed. The increase in ability and awareness of the wingers to know where their sideline is and which hand they're carrying the ball in and the timing of the jump and just the sheer body positions that they're getting in is so cool. So yeah, it was to get back more to the crux of the game, I suppose. In one respect, as a Bunnies fan, I guess you're sort of pleased that your side's staying in the game on the scoreboard. But I felt that the game was really won and lost in the end in that forward pack. Missing Sam Burgess was key. No other forwards really stood up to a certain degree. I thought Gagai was good from the back and probably had one of his better games. So, it was good to see Gagai and Valentine Holmes moving in the right direction as far as form to put themselves in contention for Origin selection. And again, I guess if you look at it on paper, you'd have to be playing some pretty horrible football for Gagai not to be selected after getting man of the series. Again, I don't like the selections being based on previous results. I think you should be picked on merit. And at the moment, I don't think he's quite there. It's not to say that he can't build towards something. But yeah, the score line, it didn't really resemble, I know I've said it didn't really resemble the performance, I thought, defensively from the Dragons. I thought they were, both them, probably the Warriors. There's a few teams, Penrith and Manly, I think are the most physical in defence at the moment. Doesn't mean they're the most effective. That was evident from the 32 points that were leaked by Manly that we'll get to later in the podcast. But I think first up contact and just aggression, the Dragons are showing great aggression in defence at the moment. And had that disallowed try for the obstruction, and then if Nene McDonald grounds that ball, all of a sudden it blows straight out, and they're 5 tries behind the Rabbitohs, and they're not even a sniff. And I know you can only play with the results that you're obtaining, so this isn't necessarily a bag on the Rabbitohs. You can only do what you can do, and if you're in the game, of course you're going to try and win it. That would be ridiculous, but yeah, props to the forwards. I think that was just about all the notes that I wanted to make. We sort of go through there again. So yeah, top performers, Jack DeBellin again, 155 metres. Yeah, it was a pretty tidy game. It wasn't, I guess, the most entertaining again because it was a lot of fight for territory coming with the back three, back five. There wasn't any great high run meters from any particular forwards. And then if we sort of go down to the negative play, again there, errors starting to creep up, close to 20 for the game. Penalties conceded, 17 for the game. So whilst better than it was last week, still not the most entertaining style of football. And I thought there were a number of games across the round that sort of ticked that box of not the most entertaining games to see. And I think that's probably more comes down to the desperation that some clubs are in at the moment as far as fighting for wins. And I guess clubs that aren't expected to win fighting for that ascendancy early on and trying to build that foundation for September footy. On to the next game. So we had the Super Saturday, the doubleheader at Mount Smart, which was a great success. The biggest crowds we've seen in New Zealand since they played a semi-final against the Roosters a number of years ago. And yeah, they were treated to some entertaining footy, probably more so in this first game. It was a little bit sloppy in both games, but I guess the score line and what was at stake in this game of the Tigers versus Storm, and the Tigers ended up going on to win 11 points to 10. A lot of talking points around this game. Most notably the performance of rookie halfback Brodie Croft. Yet again, struggling for consistency, the poor young fella. It's really hard to watch at times because it's definitely not coming from a lack of effort. It's definitely time-based. And looking back on it now, it really does surprise me how much expectation was put on this young kid's shoulders. Whilst he does possess maturity beyond his years, and we got to remember he's not even 20 yet either. But just those little things. I've been fairly critical of his defence leading into the season. I thought the underbelly was displayed a little bit in the World Club Challenge match against Leeds in the early try that Leeds did score. But yeah, he got found out again. A few little, I guess the biggest thing for the Melbourne Storm were the unforced errors. So the West Tigers held majority of possession early. The Storm scrambled well. There was that held up in the corner that Vunivalu defended quite well. And you even go back further than that young Tonomapia missed that opportunity to score that try. So if he scores that one early, does momentum shift even more? Of course it does. But yeah, it just goes, I guess, against the Melbourne Storm that we're used to seeing as one that takes those 50-50 opportunities. And that must be frustrating for the older guys, but more importantly for the younger guys, because I guess they sort of expect to be that next crop that starts to work for. And when that doesn't happen, obviously that pressure mounts. So then we go to Josh Addo-Carr, tries to save that 40-20, flicks the ball in wildly. If you didn't catch the game, go back and watch the highlights. Yeah. But the wrap out of this play that I want to give goes to Josh Aloiai. If you go back and watch that, his ability and I guess more so awareness to drop his body position low in the defence that's coming from the left-hand side, and knowing that the conditions, the greasy conditions being in New Zealand, that he was going to slide over the line, just great awareness. Really key little one percenters, that sort of come back to, which hand you carry the ball in and stuff like that. The real minutiae of the game that you start to hone in and perfect at being a professional. Really big tick in the box, something that I noticed straight away on that play that put his team in the box seat. Then you, again, more compounding errors. Brodie Croft and Vunivalu, we spoke about it on that right edge. Having Tonomapea, that was always going to be the edge that the Tigers were going to look for vulnerabilities in, and it probably came in a fashion that they weren't really expecting when they let that kickoff bounce. I'm not sure what happened communicatively between Vunivalu and Croft, but you've seen the anguish on his face as soon as Brodie Croft left it. I don't know if there'd been an early call from Vunivalu or whether he just expected, whether he knew that it was going over his head quite early on and expected Vunivalu to take it. But, they score points straight after that, and Chris Lawrence, and that was from Brodie Croft being caught on his lonesome. Got held up with the players on the outside, and then that created too much space back on the inside between himself and Felice Kafusi, and they're both left diving and at legs and got into arms tackles, which is exactly what you're trying to find as a back rower, and it was executed to perfection. And then, that's not to say that the Melbourne Storm didn't have their opportunities to win the game, despite what I believe that they didn't deserve it anyway. Seeing the short ball from Munster to Hoffman that was called forward and correctly called forward. And then right at the death, Munster again tries that little crossfield kick for Addo Carr, and there was no one that would have caught him, but again, just bounces the ball, bounces back behind him, goes out into touch. So, yeah, there was a few little clutch moments, but again, the stand-up performance of Josh Alloy, 173 run meters. It's some of the younger fellas, that are really standing up. Alex Twal, Eisenhuth are continuing, and then the experience of Madalino and Packer continues to show week after week. And the maturity of someone like Benji Marshall to go out there and knock that field goal over at such a clutch moment. Again, it's just, I guess, resonating the fact that having him on the field is just taking that pressure off Luke Brooks. And we've seen him sort of get his running game going with having that stability of Benji Marshall there. 2 line breaks from Luke Brooks. But yeah, again, completions, 65% yet again from the Storm. So 2 weeks in a row. I would love to know if that's ever happened. Again, a stat that never happened. Tigers have never beaten Melbourne Storm 2 times in a row, let alone twice in a year. So big ups for the Tigers and what Ivan Cleary is building out that club. It's really exciting. And once I'm pretty sure Josh Reynolds is in the fray to make his comeback this round in round 6. And I'm of the opinion, as most are, that Reynolds doesn't find his spot in that 13. 17, I think you're paying enough money for the bloke, and that he is going to add. He's not going to detract from this side, and he's going to be more than a worthy replacement. But I guess, again, like you put him at 9, but then who misses out between Peter Godinay and Jacob Little? Not to mention they've got McKilrick on their books as well. So now you've sort of, I guess, poisoned with opportunity of having potentially 4 players that can play 9. Yeah, I don't know which way you go. I probably, to be honest, I probably liked what Jacob Little's brought to the Tigers' attack off the bench. But again, it's going to be thoroughly interesting. But I think you'll more than likely see Josh Reynolds come off the bench. I guess an area where Craig Bellamy will be a lot more happier is we have a look here is the negative play and the penalties conceded. But 19 errors, man. 19 errors to the Melbourne Storm. It's really incredible. It's really incredible to see a side that we have so much respect for. But I guess that's almost like the biased, Queensland nature coming out of me. It's the expectation, and I guess that's what breeds success in that club is that expectation from within, and you can see how salty they get when they don't win. So it's good to see that it still means something to them. But like any great coach side, I think we're going to see more good things come out of Melbourne Storm than bad. But are they going to make the top 4? That is probably the biggest question now that threatens their success. And based off their form at the moment, you'd have to say no, knowing that there's going to be a number of players that play State of Origin still, Munster and Smith. So they're already struggling with that spine as it is, and Slater. So you take those 3 away, then even more pressure mounts on Brodie Croft, and so the circle continues. So really interesting times coming ahead for the middle part of the season for Craig Bellamy's players. Not to mention, you've got some guys. Will Chambers is going to be there, you would suspect. Kafusi's on the cusp. Christian Welsh has been in emerging developments for Queensland. I don't think he'll get a start this season, but stranger things have happened. Tim Glasby played fucking State of Origin last year, so stranger things can definitely happen. On to the next game. We'll keep progressing forward. Again, no real great surprises here, even as a Cowboys fan. The Warriors skipping out to a 22 points to 12 victory. I guess the biggest positive for the Warriors is the expectation from the general public was that this is a game that they should win based off current form, and they did. They went out and won it. Sorry, they. I think to say they exceeded expectations is an understatement. I had a few people sort of say, "Oh, I thought the Cowboys were going to sort of find their way back into it late in the game there," but I didn't get that sense at all. I didn't think the attitude was right towards that back end, discipline-wise. There was just too much whinging about what the referees were doing and the plays that they were calling. And when that becomes your focus, as we've seen with a few sides this year, it's always going to be the detriment to your success. There's no way that you can continue to question the referee's decisions and then your focus on winning the game exceeds that, because it's, negativity is what sort of sets you into overload. So, it was a shame to see that, but I guess you sort of just say with the old adage, it is what it is. But again, not to dwell on the negatives too much, I'll sort of gloss over them, but, massive props to the New Zealand Warriors and what Kearney's continuing to build. So, between the Warriors, Newcastle Tigers, and even the Dragons yet again, you've got to give credit where credit's due, and they're playing some entertaining football. And I said it in the preview to this round, there's still that element of flair that they're having success with, but I think having the maturity of Blake Green there is knowing when to pull them back, and I guess they're having that cap there, and we're seeing them after breaks in plays, they're doing that 3-count breath, and fuck, it might look a bit weird and a bit dicky, but the fact that they've got those guys to buy into it, and it seems to be working so far, so why go away from it? And I guess having the success off the back of that helps, definitely helps. If you try and implement something new and the success doesn't come straight away, we're going to fob it off pretty damn quick, aren't you? I just want to quickly, sorry for those guys that are following on live and even on YouTube, I haven't plugged my laptop in. Yep, we're good there. Sorry about that. We're back. So just to get back to that Warriors attack, big ticks in the box. Some of the catch pass from Sean Johnson. We've seen Paul Kent come out last week and say he didn't feel as if Sean Johnson deserved to come back into that side after they won without him, and he isn't the linchpin to their success. He's very much, I guess, riding off the coattails of the influence that Blake Green has brought to the club, and no doubt it is a big tick in the box, and he's added to the performance of the Warriors. But to say something like that about Sean Johnson, should he be at the club? I think after last year, he should have moved on for, I guess, the betterment of his own personal career. I don't think he owed anything more to the Warriors in the trying that he's given. But, to say now that he has re-signed, to kick him out of a side that, he kicked 2 field goals in 5 minutes to help beat the Raiders. He was exceptional in their performance against the Rabbitohs the week before that. So, and then he comes out with this, kicks it 100%. Those 2 penalty goals in the 53rd and the 75th minute proved very, very important. The form of David Fusitu'a continues. It just shows the power to get back to the back fives, providing support that I spoke about in like the Dragons game. Fusitu'a, Mamalo, Qatar, all those guys, RTS, they're to be a forward in a side like that when you've got not only athletic but big bodies taking those meters up within those first 3 and sometimes even 4 rucks trying to fight for territory, it's just such a big weight off the back. Especially when you do have a few forwards that are a little bit older. You've got the likes of Blair there, Having Simon Mannering back in the side for his first game, it was going to take him a little while to adjust. So to have that luxury of being able to start your set on the front foot, it just goes to show what effect that has over the course of 80 minutes. And to get back to the Cowboys attack, more of the same has happened. Their completions were great. You go down here, I think within the first half, it was sitting at about 90-odd%. So they finished with 86%, so 32 of 37 sets. Only 6 errors. Their discipline was better again. So we only seen 15 penalties total in this game. But I guess, at times you see there the ineffective tackles, 21-4. They just really lost the middle. Jason Taumalolo, what have I got here? Ran for 107 metres with 11 hit-ups. So that's got to be his lowest numbers in a number of years. So, the pressure continues to mount. You lose Jordan McLean, you need certain guys to step up to the plate and start to perform, and it just hasn't happened at all. I thought the effort was there from Scott Bolton, but it's probably going to take him a little while to adapt to that starting speed after not having started at all for the first 4 rounds. He proved pivotal, as did Corey Jensen last year in their run to the grand final in place of Matt Scott, who was out through injury. But it just showed when they did play with a bit of speed into the line. Ben Hampton's try evidenced that, and for whatever reason, they just couldn't continue to replicate it. And their fifth tackle options for me continue to break down. I don't know if it's a lack of communication or awareness, but it almost seems like Hampton finds himself with the ball and he doesn't really realise that it's the last, or it should have been on a 2-pass to Thurston, or is Morgan kicking, or are he playing down a short side? There's so much confusion. There's still options there, but it's almost like when they get into good ball, they're burning tackles that don't need to be burnt. This is fucking professional football. You should be able to get to one point of the field and play straight away. That burning style of attack, it needs to be reduced, especially when you're playing from behind and you're desperate for victories. A month without success, that's a lonely place to be in professional football. And when losing becomes a habit, you can even see that it starts to weigh on the greatest of players, and we're seeing that with Jonathan Thurston. Look, I agree to a certain extent with what Greg Alexander have to say. He does look a step off the pace, and I guess my question is more is he carrying some sort of injury? He didn't seem to be super comfortable with that shoulder out there. He sort of grabbed that at a couple of times. And, he just didn't really want to take the ball into the line and play deep like he's so good at doing. And when that doesn't happen, it really limits the opportunities of the talents of Cohen Hess and Gavin Cooper on the edges. But I can't remember who was bringing it up. It might have even been Kronk pre-game, talking about Morgan. It's almost like he's sort of half standing off because all the talk has been around, once Jonathan Thurston is back, it's no longer his team. And that was the role that he played leading into the grand final last year. And he did it really, really well. Struggled the first couple of weeks, but then put together a really strong six-week block that saw them make the grand final unexpectedly. And now I really feel like Michael Morgan's playing within himself, which is such a shame to see. But who knows? It only takes one win to develop that confidence yet again. And there's a few teams within the competition that are going to be praying that happens for them. So they've got the Bulldogs in round 6, so both desperate for a win. But you'd like to think that with the personnel that the Cowboys have and the maturity in the spine, will we see Lachlan Coote come back now after 2 losses despite his availability? Time will tell. So, we'll stop harping on about that. But again, props to the Warriors. They're playing exciting footy. Love what they're doing on the edge via guys like Pulu, even Ignatius Parsi. Tohu Harris is really starting to find his own. It's great to see Simon Mannering back out in the field, and it's great to see the Warriors in general starting to perform with the I guess tenacity, but more so consistency that we pray would come into a club like that. Alrighty, a bit of a scrappy game this one. Newcastle up against the Brisbane Broncos. So the Knights went on to win. Jakey, you're watching along there, I believe, champion. So you'll be happy to hear this game. So yeah, 15 points to 10. Newcastle went on. The big points of success were some of the younger guys again. I thought Lachlan Fitzgibbon and Kalen Ponga were probably Newcastle's best. We saw Danny Levi have his first start for the season off the bench, and he played quite well. Defensively, he was strong and added that stability in the middle, which we were used to seeing as he started to mature last year. So yeah, see there, Ponga, 223 metres, 2 line breaks from Fitzgibbon early on and before he finally scored the first try of the match. So we see a fairly even weight of possession. Completions were pretty close as well. I think Nathan Brown will probably be most happy with that, and it's evidence as to why they held on to win. And I guess the game sort of played out fairly. Yeah, Jakey Harris, fuck Bennett. Yeah, I totally agree, Jakey. Saying there, the Ponga Fitzgibbon combo is gold. Yeah, just the ability of. I was discussing this with a couple of lads that I was watching the game with on Saturday night. It's almost, you know that Ponga's going to do that skip to the outside, but I think it's sort of hard to see with the angle that you watch the game on at home versus the behind the play or in front of the play, the width that he must create with that movement. And I'd love to see that more often. I would love to see that view more often to really understand what he's doing to that defensive structure with that footwork. Because it really does engage defenders and create space on the outside, but then after a while, it attracts that inside defender, so then it leaves them vulnerable back on the inside once he starts to turn players back under. And that's really exciting to see. But leading into... yeah, absolutely. So Jakey says, great to see Ponga starting to play a bit more on the right side too. Yeah, so we've seen all the success down that left edge. But yeah, starting to even the play up and show up both sides of the ruck. And I guess that probably stems from the way that Mitchell Pearce is trying to direct the side and say, hey, let's not try and rest on our laurels here just because it is working. Let's try and create some sort of dynamic. And I dare say, Jakey, that probably happened a lot too because of the dynamic change with Moga now out for the season. And that's going to take a little while for the confidence of Ponga to develop that with Ross and Seo on that left edge. But yeah, the Bronx, again... It was almost a bit of a sniff similar to the Dragons Rabbits. They sort of stayed close enough where you're like, oh, fuck, are they going to snag this? But even though the score read quite close, you were never really confident that the Bronx were going to cross the line and actually go on and win the match. When they looked good, surprise, surprise, I've said it week after week, it was when Milford or Nicarima got their running game going. We've seen Milford quite unluckily go through the line and then fucking, I don't know what happened. He tried to throw that pass and it just crumbles along the ground. But yeah, it was really, really odd. The forwards really struggled, and that's where I felt that Newcastle were going to have success. I thought the experience of guys like Guerra, Hyington and Lillyman were going to play into their favour. Missing Alex Glenn was quite evident. The return of Pangai didn't prove to be too much of an influence. And we see, yeah, the negative play there from the Bronx. 10 errors. And even though the penalty count was quite low, so first time we've seen single-figure penalty count, probably this year, I would imagine. But again, you look at the difference there. They don't give away that penalty. There's 2 points off, so they're back to 13-10. Osako kicks out of the goal, 13-12. All of a sudden, we're looking at a totally different nature of the game heading into the final stages. Do they play for a field goal, perhaps take its extra time, putting the pressure on Newcastle yet again? So these are little clutch things, and now that the game is being scrutinised a lot more and we're seeing more and more penalties, this is the difference between winning and losing that we're starting to take note of this season. And an area where it was most evident was not only in the Cronulla Storm game last week, but also Eels Penrith, which we'll get to soon enough. I guess to sort of touch on the whole discussion between, or argument between Brown and Bennett, it sort of irked me the way Bennett carried himself in that post-match press conference. I know it's nothing really new from what we've come to expect of Wayne Bennett and the way he does talk in those press conferences, but I guess what shits you even more is Darius Boyes tries to be exactly like him. He's gotten a little bit better, but it's quite frustrating to watch. And it's an area, I guess, where I sort of sympathise with the mainstream media and knowing that it's their job and they're trying to ask that. And there's one dude that got grilled. He's like, asking about dominant halves is not really a dominant half. It sort of goes against Bronx history. And Bennett's like, it's not the history at all. The 8 years that I wasn't there, they never had a dominant half, blah, 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 blah. It just didn't really give up too much. It was quite short saying it. That there was questions asked, do there need to be changes in the halves or any changes across the team? He's like, this is the best team that we've got at the club. And like that was it. There was no justification for it. It was just a blanket statement. And I think that's just shit. If that's the best team in the club, and he seemed to brush it off and saying he's quite happy with where they were at and they were improving and that they've just got to, stick with it and a few things got to go their way. And like I said, sort of broke it down there a little bit. Yeah, if that penalty doesn't go against them, if they get a kick a goal, perhaps they put themselves in a position where they can snag a win, like they did against the Tigers. But I guess that comes with the expectation of being a Broncos supporter and being a Broncos player or coach. Is the expectation of winning is there straight away. It doesn't matter who's fucking wearing those jerseys. That expectation to win is always there. And they're definitely not delivering that. And I'm hearing all about it with a lot of guys that I associate with who are Broncos supporters. But yeah, something needs to change. You can't just keep hoping that the same guys are going to find form when they're not losing. I don't know whether that's in the forward pack. I said it last week. I think Jack Bird just needs to find the footy more, whether we put him in a 13 jersey and see what happens. I think you've got to ask it. You left Tom Opachik on the bench there, played no minutes, so what the fuck's the point? You're better off having a forward that can contribute rather than having an outside back sit on the sideline for 80 minutes. So, yeah, interesting time moving forward for the Broncos, and I guess all will be revealed in the coming weeks to see if anything does change in Wayne Bennett's 17. On to Sunday footy, we're almost home. This was probably my favourite game of the round, to be honest. It was really interesting. Quite high-scoring game, 32 points to 20 to the Gold Coast Titans. So they go back-to-back. They are the highest-ranked Queensland team. Who would have thought after 5 weeks of footy that they'd be the highest-ranked team, especially with the lack of experience that is across the board, most notably in the halves. And again, the up-and-down start for Trent Barrett's Sea Eagles continues. But I think one thing that I sort of took note out of this game was, even though the Titans conceded 20 points, and they conceded 14 last week, they conceded a lot to beat the Raiders in round one. I think that it comes down to the age of the squad and the experience of the squad. And we speak about sides winning games with their defence. I think the Titans are going to be quite the contrary to that style of play. I think